You're listening to a 4x4 Radio Network podcast.
This month's CentreSteer podcast is sponsored by Commonwealth Classics. Commonwealth Classics is a direct importer of classic vehicles from Europe and South America and has a rotating collection of rare and unique Land Rovers. Their showroom is located in Virginia, just 45 minutes from Washington, D.C. Visit www.cwclassics.com to view their current inventory of classic vehicles.
The CentreSteer Podcast, a Land Rover podcast by Land Rover owners.
Welcome to the CentreSteer Podcast, the first Land Rover podcast on the planet. CentreSteer is a podcast by for and about Land Rover owners. This is podcast number 86 for May 2020. For posterity reference, many countries are still under some degree of lockdown, shelter in place, or stay-at-home orders due to COVID-19. We don't know when you listen, so just keep that in mind as you listen to this episode. I am your host, John Costage. Joining me over Zoom, Harold, Morgan, and Dixon. Welcome, gentlemen.
Yo. Greetings. Hey.
Listeners can't view is Dixon reclining over two 101s.
He's in his Sky Creeper.
That sounds like that's a good James Bond movie named Sky Creeper. Our guests this month are from the Northern California Land Rover Club, Greg and Eric. They returned to tell us about last year's Rovicon Rally and plans for this year's Rovicon Rally. As always, thanks for your comments, likes, follows on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and email. As we begin our 8th year, we have started to put the podcast up on YouTube, starting with the very first podcast, posting maybe 2 a day. That's the plan. I think it'll take us, a month and a half to get caught up. There are 2 playlists. One's for the current podcast, which will be roughly a year. That's what I'm thinking. And then there's a podcast archive, and that's for the past shows. And we'll put the current shows up also when they are ready. The account is, shocker, CentreSteer Podcast. That's on YouTube.
And spelled the correct way, I'm assuming.
Spelled as Her Majesty intended. And we've also added a voicemail feature to the website. Instead of writing an email and then I get to read it on the air, you can record your comment or question, enter your name and email, and send it in. Most likely, of course, we'll include the audio on the podcast. There's a big red button on the website called Send Voicemail. Morgan and I tested it out. It's pretty cool.
It is.
See, what we need, though, is like a button to you can type and it records the big heavy mechanical clacking as you type, and then it sends that message.
That would be the Morgan option, right?
Yes.
Morgan, give us some typing. Let's we want to hear that. Nice mechanical keyboard. And if you've been following Oxford in America and joining our interviews with figures in the Overland and Land Rover community and liking our coverage of all things Land Rover, please consider supporting the show. You can be a regular podcast supporter through Patreon. You can be a one-time supporter through Buy Me a Tea, or show off your support by purchasing a t-shirt or sticker. Visit our website, CentreSteer.com, for all the details. And last podcast, we mentioned we're planning to hold another stay-at-home Rover rally. I think we've come up with a different idea, but it does require a good bit of advanced planning for it to be successful. So once we work out all the details, put this podcast to bed and get it posted, and we feel confident, then we'll announce details. The stay-at-home Rover rally, 2, 3...
somewhere in that ballpark.
And now the news. JLR in talks over $1 billion plus state loan, £1 billion, has asked for support package from the government to help survive the coronavirus pandemic. And they have talked to the British Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, looking to have a loan of in excess of £1 billion. Falling demand because of the lockdown has hit the entire automotive sector. According to Tim Lawrence, an industry analyst, returning demand in China has encouraged JLR to restart production. Last month, JLR said retail sales for the fourth quarter ending March 31st, because they're on their fiscal year is April to March. That fell by more than 30% to 110,000 vehicles. In 2018, it sold about 600,000 vehicles. Sky reported that JLR ended the last fiscal year with cash and investments of £3.6 billion and had access to up to £2 billion in credit. Things are starting to sort of shift back to the good, I think. at least certainly in China. Although in the UK market, it suffered its worst month in more than 7 decades in April as the coronavirus restrictions forced dealerships to close, pushing sales of new vehicles down by more than 97%.
So basically the worst month in the history of Land Rover.
Yep.
Pretty much.
If you're talking 7 decades, that's about how old the Land Rover brand is. So,
And I believe the previous low was in the 4,000 a month sales range. So significantly lower.
Yes, and to be clear, that 97% was for all British sales. So not strictly Land Rover, but all different.
and what was the total? Like 68 vehicles for the month?
Just over 4,320 cars were sold to private buyers, businesses, and fleets last month in Britain. That would have been March.
Well, that's about 4,000 more than I thought they might have.
That compares with roughly 161,000 in April of 2019.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And to be clear,
hence the 97% drop.
And moving on in another article, JLR recovers up to 75% production in China as demand returns. JLR has restored 3/4 of its budgeted production in China. Chery Jaguar Land Rover Automotive Co. Limited, or CJLR. I had to read it just for that. Manufacturing plant in Changshu, which gradually resumed operation from third week of February, has restored its production capacity to 75% of pre-COVID-19 levels, said a person who requested anonymity. Ramped up production in its China unit will be providing a big relief to the company as sales nosedived 85% in the country in February. That would be China. The Changshu plant has an annual production capacity of about 200,000 units per year, produces models such as the Evoque, the Disco Sport, the Jaguar XFL, and the XEL variants, and also the E-Pace model. According to the company, its largest market, North America, reported a year-on-year decline of 7.5%. This is the first time I've seen these numbers. It was in this article. Europe and China saw a decline of 16% and 9% year-on-year, respectively. It looks like that's year-on-year, but month-to-month, like the same month, year-to-year comparison. So things have taken a big hit, but China is slowly coming back.
Well, the advantage of being the first place to get shut down by the virus is you get to be the first one to open back up.
And it's important that they're open back up because they're also producing the majority of the parts for production.
And the first Range Rover made under social distancing measures comes off the JLR Solihull production line. This was May 20th. Today, the first Range Rover made under social distancing measures drove off the production line at Solihull following a recent temporary pause in production. Measures include temperature checks with thermal cameras, 2-meter distance between people whenever possible, personal protective equipment where there is when they aren't able to stay distant, the introduction of one-way systems and enhanced cleaning in its plants. In addition, JLR is offering every employee a reusable face visor made by the company.
Can you imagine having to build a legacy Defender with social distancing?
It'd be nearly impossible.
It would, or it'd be very slow because you'd have to probably have one person do all the work on that station.
Yeah, I've assembled a Defender by myself, and I'll tell you what, there's a lot of things on there that you really need 2 or 3 people in close proximity to do it quickly. Otherwise, you'll be like, I've been an hour running one bolt before.
I believe it.
By myself, because my arms are only so long, and getting around both sides of something is it's difficult sometimes.
Production of Jaguar and Land Rover vehicles also resumed this week at the Nitra and Graz plants. That's Slovakia and Austria. Last week, the team at the Engineering Manufacturing Center in Wolverhampton began building Ingenium engines again to enable the gradual return to vehicle production. Manufacturing will resume at Howell in the UK on June 8th, starting with one shift. Small pockets of business-critical activity are taking place at Castle Bromwich as JLR prepares for new model year introductions.
Let me ask a quick question here. When you say production is going to return, do you mean Halewood?
What did I say?
Halwell? You mean Halewood, right? It's Halewood. You said Halwell.
My apologies. It's Halewood.
Okay, just checking. You have a habit of doing that. I was just making sure I knew what you were saying.
So in Nitra, things have restored. They've renewed operation on May 18th after a nearly 2-month closure. One shift is running. The company plans to start full production gradually in the coming weeks. And the car maker provided masks to its employees at the beginning of the pandemic, not every pandemic, sewn by the staff. And they have also made more than 8,500 masks. They're following all the normal measures of being distant and having their temperature checked. Face shields, and in the cafeteria, they have placed plastic separators near the tables. So if you've ordered a new Defender, I think the chances of you getting it have now increased.
Cool.
Yes. In fact, I think I've heard one American listener who has ordered new Defender. Apparently, it's been sitting in the port in Slovakia for a couple months, and it may in fact be on its way to North America soon. Maybe mid-June if all goes well. But I think that one was all produced, I think, before the shutdown.
It's been sitting there so that dock employees have probably been taking it down to get beer or whatever.
Right, exactly.
Probably going to have an odd smell in it now.
It's used for important things, Harold.
Well, hey, yeah, absolutely.
Essential work. It already has
work.
provenance.
By definition, anything you can do in a Land Rover is essential work. It's all important.
In non-Land Rover specific news, 40% of a new car's cost is electronic systems. So as a new white paper from consulting firm Deloitte on the semiconductor industry puts hard numbers to the cost of semiconductors and electronics in the automotive industry, the marquee number is likely still a surprise. As summarized by Car and Driver, the paper notes that as of 2017, electronic systems powered by semiconductor-based chips comprised 40% of the cost of a new car. That was up from 18% in 2000, 20% in 2007, and is projected to reach 45% in 2030. The cost of the base semiconductors that enable the systems was roughly $312 per car in 2013 and is expected to rise to nearly $600 per car by 2020. Marching towards a future full of autonomous driving and associated neural nets puts more fuel into cost increases. Level 4 autonomy said to require 24 sensors by itself, each sensor requiring a number of chips in order to function and cooperate with every other sensor in the vehicle. The other three megatrends driving electronics systems growth and cost are vehicle powertrain electrification, digital connectivity, and advanced security.
The interesting thing is here that the cost of the electronics is going up as a percentage of the vehicle, primarily because there's so much more electronics in the vehicle, because the cost of making the electronics has been going down over the past several decades. Can you imagine how much of a percentage of the vehicle cost it would be if you had today's amount of electronics in a vehicle 30 years ago?
Right.
It'd be like 96% of the cost of the vehicle. If it was, obviously the technology didn't exist back then, but if you had to do it with the cost of electronics back then.
Well, the old cars were certainly big enough to carry around all those vacuum tubes.
Well, yeah, there you go. Just have to warm everything up for 20 minutes before you can go anywhere.
But the R&D that's associated with this electronic must be just absolutely astronomical.
Yeah.
I don't understand why. And it's just not Land Rover. It's other car companies too. Just don't go and adopt. Well, some have, the Apple Play or Google Play to go and do the infotainment system for them, because the cost to R&D that all on your own when you're not an electronics company must be just horrendous.
Well, I think you partner up with somebody who is an electronics company. I think that's how it's done.
Right. Like Land Rover is currently partnered with BlackBerry.
Right. And Ford did that for a number of years with Microsoft. Having owned a Microsoft Sync in a Ford product, it was okay, but...
Well, I think that wasn't your number one complaint about that Ford product, mind you.
That is correct. But there were still issues. One time that I was one of the first times I was taking a long trip, multiple hours in the Focus, and the entertainment system completely died. Wouldn't come back. I couldn't even play a radio, nothing. It was just nothing.
Was that before or after all the tires blew out?
That was before, and it was only 2 tires.
More than you had spares for. So it may as well have been all of them.
Partnering up is probably a good idea, but I don't know that I would completely rely on that firm.
Well, you got to choose your partners carefully in everything you do in life.
But that's the beauty of the Apple CarPlay and Android's CarPlay, whatever they call it, is that they are kind of their own standalone things. And I think BMW was going to do one exclusively, and then it quickly changed because they were going to charge more, I think, to use Apple or Android. I couldn't remember which, but that's the nice thing about those is that you can use them, but you still would need an underlying base system for your car.
Sounds like the Porsche for playbook. Charge more to get less function. Oh, you want less things in your car? You want me to delete stuff? That costs extra.
More electronics are in cars. There's more sensors every day for more and more reasons. And it's interesting to see what percentage of the vehicle cost that is.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. There's a lot of silicon these days in these things.
And speaking of new cars coming up, the new Range Rover, this is the full size, will take a huge leap forward. The all-new Land Rover, Range Rover, or as I read it in my head the first time I read the article, the Land Range Rover. Anyways, the Range Rover on the way to replace the current fourth-generation model that's been on the market since 2012. JLR isn't letting the global pandemic stand in its way. According to Autocar, JLR is pushing ahead with the Range Rover Mark V development as planned, as the brand new luxury SUV inches closer to a late 2021 launch. Like the current Range Rover, the new one is expected to be offered in both standard and long wheelbase forms, although it'll be underpinned by JLR's new modular longitudinal architecture platform developed with hybrid and pure electric powertrains in mind, as well as over-the-air updates, software updates that could help reduce the number of trips owners have to make to the dealership. I laugh because that's always what you hear.
No, it just means now you'll have to, instead of consulting a technician, you're going to have to go to the Genius Bar to get your vehicle upgraded.
Power plant options will reportedly include a BMW V8, a dual motor plug-in hybrid is thought to be in the pipeline, as with one electric motor on the rear axle and one tied directly to the transmission. I thought that was an interesting. Why would they not put one on each axle?
There's already a lot of stuff happening up front, and it's probably a packaging concern. If you've got running a PHEV and you've got an internal combustion engine that's there to recharge the batteries, you may not have space for that plus the electric motor at the front axle. So by tying it into the transmission, it's still close, but it's out of the way.
Yeah, and generally, if you tie it into the axle itself, you're running a pure electric vehicle as opposed to a hybrid, where you really want to integrate it with the drivetrain. The electric motor on the rear axle is probably what powers it when it's in pure electric mode for the short period.
Depending how it's done, you could theoretically use it for braking too. Use it as a generator.
Or if you're really desperate to charge the batteries, you pull it with the engine up front and drag it with the electric motor in the back to recharge the batteries. Which is going to be great when you hit a slippery spot.
And then in the rendering ideas, and please consider this a rendered article. This is nothing based on any actual Land Rover JLR information. The 2022 Range Rover Sport rendering adopts Defender's design cues. And as I said, this is a rendered idea. Back in February, both the flagship Range Rover and the smaller Sport were caught testing on separate occasions, showing us the early development of all new vehicles. Of course, their designs were hidden under wraps, so we're not quite sure in what direction JLR is headed to. However, you don't need to look too far away to know what Land Rover wants to employ on its new cars. Design-wise, the new Defender should give you a glimpse of this new design language.
Well, because you can't allow the Defender to look like nothing else that Land Rover makes. That's just not allowed.
Oh, it's Jerry's one design to rule them all.
I thought that was the Velar or the Evoque.
Well, what's the difference?
They're all soon going to be the same.
The Velar is just an Evoque on steroids.
So Motor One has taken a Range Rover Sport and applied some cues from the Defender. And this is all their rendering. I do like the front lights, even though I'm a big fan of the 3/4 round lights, but it looks
Angry
good.
Birds.
But I think it fits the Range Rover Sport. I've always thought Range Rover Sport was a little more angry and a little more aggressive. So I actually think it fits very well. But I don't like, and I know all of us don't like, and we don't even know what to call it, is that stupid square that is made of plastic, although you think it's metal, that sits in the back near the rear pillars in the glass.
It's an automotive skin tag.
What does he call it? The accent piece? Off. Yes.
I think it is officially called an accent square.
Yeah, I'm calling it a skin tag. Leave it there long enough, it'll be a cancer, and you'll find them on every Land Rover product.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the only reason we brought this article up, was to hear that comment. And moving on, the 2021 Range Rover Evoque long wheelbase spy shots. The 2020 Evoque has met with very warm reception amongst the automotive press. Judging from our latest spy shots, the smallest Range Rover success is about to lead to a slightly longer version being launched. The spy shot show an Evoque prototype with longer rear doors designed to fill a stretched wheelbase. There are two possibilities here. One is a new Evoque long wheelbase model, possibly with third row seats, to be sold globally. The other is a stretched Evoque for the Chinese market, where even compact crossover SUVs have long wheelbase options that offer up legroom in the second row.
So let me get this straight. This is the Land Rover, Range Rover, Evoque, long wheelbase, something or other, made by the People's Cherry Jaguar Land Rover manufacturing company.
To fill in that non-existent gap between the Evoque and the Range Rover Sport.
Yeah.
Some sort of, maybe, not sure. It looks like they're working on a long wheelbase version that would be only exclusively used in the Chinese market. That seems to be the thought.
But, they got to have that nice long name to go with the long name of the company.
Yes, exactly. And apparently Mercedes-Benz and Volkswagen also have similar vehicles of that type.
Oh, there you go. Got to keep up.
An actual review from Autocar of the Land Rover Defender 110 D240S out of the UK. I think we talked about this article last month, but it was another article talking about Autocar. So now we're actually looking at the Autocar article.
The D240 is the sort of low to mid spec with the diesel, right?
Correct. Actually, yeah. As a matter of fact, that's the very first question, Harold. What is it? Of all the Land Rover Defender variants, the D240 seems to be the best position for the UK residents. It uses a 2-liter turbo diesel with 237 brake horsepower, 317 pound-feet, assume of torque. And while these modest outputs don't quite translate to sparkling fuel economy in S form, the Defender's pre-option price is reasonable. I think they mentioned here, although I didn't highlight it, I think the S is one above base, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Here, though, we drive it on the road at length for the first time, a British road at that, and a narrow one, which was my biggest concern for this 2,105 millimeter wide car when I first drove it in Namibia. Of course, this is Matt Pryor of Autocar saying that. What is it like? I needn't have worried. The Defender has a tall, upright driving position, a large steering wheel, and a low window line. The body's edges are also easily gauged, so it's simple to accurately guide the thing along even tight village roads. The ride's remarkably good while you do it, too. Land Rover has opted to give the Defender a relaxed gait, with noticeable lean but a controlled roll rate and an effective body control, even when the chassis is loaded up. The 2-liter Ingenium diesel was also quiet. While this engine family first rolled out, the diesel was a grumbly thing, but now refinement is first rate, as good here as in any of the cars in which we've tried, and quieter than its counterparts in the Ford Ranger Raptor or the Toyota Land Cruiser. Wait a minute. The UK gets a Raptor in diesel?
Yeah.
Of course.
Well, we won't.
No.
Everybody's got to get the cool stuff.
Sorry, listeners, we had to stop on that one. Ford Raptor. Oh no, it's a Ford Ranger Raptor. That's the smaller one, isn't it? That's not the F-150 Raptor.
Right, but it's still, that makes it cool as well. Again, something we're not allowed to have, even though Ford's an American company. We can't get their coolest stuff here in America. What is up with that?
Continuing on with the diesel, a muted thrum is typically as noisy as it gets, and the smooth 8-speed transmission with low range ratios is the only option. The electronically locking center differential is standard, though an E-diff at the rear is 1,000-pound option. Inside, all Defenders feel good. If you want to read the rest of that article, there's a little bit more to it. You can, and we'll have a link in the show notes. But that's the 43,000 pound for a Defender diesel, which diesel not to be available here in the States.
It's just going to say another cool version that we don't get.
You can have Tesla running gear in your Land Rover. In the modern world, people looking to amp up their Land Rovers can do that thanks to East Coast Defenders here in the U.S. The custom shop will swap out the old dinosaur burning drivetrain for a 100 kilowatt hour, KWH, just kilowatt hour. Did I read that right?
Yep.
Drivetrain taken out of a Tesla. The bad news is neither the first prototype or the pricing have been unveiled yet. As we've come to expect, however, electrification comes with certain advantages like instant-on torque that will shuffle the newly electric Defender to 60 miles per hour from a standstill. What's the time, guys? We talked about it. Anybody remember? I'm going to quiz you. How long? 0 to 60?
2.6, I think.
No, it was 5.
5 seconds. It's still impressive.
That's not quick enough. Come on.
EV range is expected to be within 220 miles. There's a video associated with this. I recommend you check it out. It's neat to see the video. And aside from the very beginning when they show it accelerating from a stop, all you hear is mud, grass against the body because it's so quiet.
And East Coast Rovers has been doing LS swaps for a while. So nice to see them doing an electric option at this point.
Seems like every shop's been doing LS swaps. It's like so passé at this point. Sorry to say that, but
exactly. But hopefully they've been doing it long enough that the engineering for braking and such has been beefed up as well, which is needed for electric and anything with a higher output swap.
There actually are a number of options out there these days. None of them are cheap, but there are some good options. Forbines are doing Willwoods now. And they'll set you up with big Willwoods if you're willing to put 20-inch wheels on it.
I think that's common with the people doing LS swaps and stuff here in the US to just put big wheels on.
Well, yeah, because they're all like, lowering them and putting dubs on them and cruising them all. And,
Yep. Yeah. Not off-roading those.
Yeah.
And using Tesla batteries, as we've heard before, apparently they're slightly better batteries, more compact, I think better produced, if I remember correctly, than some other batteries. But
as long as you're using the ones that don't ignite.
Moving on, this is the Land Rover Defender rival, the Ineos Grenadier. Coventry Live has video that was released, offers the best glimpse yet of the Grenadier, the rugged off-roader, which is currently being developed and is set to rival the Defender. In the 5-minute video, engineering journalist Mark Evans goes behind the scenes at Magna Steyr in Austria, the company developing the Grenadier's suspension system, and speaks to Magna development engineer Matthias Mayer. The footage offers an insight into the features of the suspension system and an explanation of how it works. The video tells how a coil spring suspension system with heavy-duty dampeners was chosen. They quote here, "So how are the engineers at Magna creating the ultimate 4x4 suspension? Well, by taking apart the world's most renowned off-roaders and benchmarking them, exploring 3 main options, leaf spring, coil spring, or airbag. There was only one way to go, it seems, coils and heavy-duty dampeners."
I like that leaf springs was back on the table for this.
Yeah, at least they looked into it. Yeah. Right.
Well, they need something to rule out, I guess, quickly.
Followed by airbags.
As far as reverse engineering some of the better off-roaders, I mean, they already make the G-Wagon and the Pinzgauer, so it's a pretty short trip to look at those.
Yep.
Site development is underway to support planned start of production in 2021. The Ineos is also investing in a sub-assembly plant in Portugal, and the Portugal will produce the Grenadier's body and chassis, working in conjunction with Ineos' European supply chain partners.
Cool.
No word on whether will be available in the U.S. I didn't see anything about that.
So in other words, if you have to ask.
Yeah, probably not. Though they are farther along with development than I expected from this product. It seemed to be very much vaporware.
It seems very, very prototypey at this point, more than just project with a K.
Yep.
And it sounds like they're going to be releasing videos periodically. This was the second one released, so there's probably another. I didn't see information about those other videos. So my guess is they're doing some sort of marketing campaign that it's out there.
Yeah, they've got some kind of countdown campaign.
And in Land Rover family news, Nick Wilks, who is the son of Land Rover co-founder Spencer Wilks, passed away in April. And Land Rover had a nice little in memoriam video that they put out, and it uses a lot of the drawing in the sand motif. Sorry to the Wilks family for the loss of
Land Rover
Nick.
Family, literally.
And actually the whole Land Rover community. Reading from the YouTube post they have here is Land Rover says, "Family has always been a big part of the Land Rover story, so today we pay tribute to a member of ours who has sadly passed away. Nick Wilks wasn't just the son of Land Rover co-founder Spencer Wilks. He was part of the family whose legacy of innovation and willingness to go above and beyond continues to guide our company to this day."
So he would have been a little kid when the Land Rover was first conceived then. He'd have been one of the little kids bouncing around in the back of the Jeep when they figured out they needed to make one of their own.
And moving on, a couple fun Defender stories. The James Bond Land Rover Defender heads to auction. A Land Rover Defender, which had a starring role in the James Bond movie Spectre, is heading under the hammer. It is one of just 10 cars of the type used in the film, with each of them created with the help of specialist Land Rover modification company Bowler Motorsport, now owned by Land Rover. Massive 37-inch tires are among the noticeable upgrades on the 110 pickup. Along with stiffened suspension, heavy-duty roll cage, a hydraulic handbrake has also been fitted, and the engine output has been up to 180 brake horsepower. Just 7 of the original 110 cars survived the movie, with 3 destroyed during the course of the filming. This car is number 9 of the fleet. And at time of recording, the auction ended yesterday, but I didn't hear if it sold or whatnot. So, Harold, your chance may have passed to get a pickup.
Oh, well, I'll just have to build my own, I guess.
Probably a little more affordable.
And probably less used.
Or just kindlier used. Because I imagine this one's been used hard.
Oh, yeah. Finally, stay at home and people building all of their Lego Land Rover Defenders, which are pretty cool. There's 2 stories around this. One is a gentleman who is a photographer I believe he's out of the UK, and took some photos. His name is Morgan Bailey Woods. Took some really nice photos of his Land Rover Defender Lego, inside and outside. You want to check that out. I'll have a link in the show notes, but his Instagram account is Morgan_Woods SYT. Are all Morgans photographers?
No, I would not consider myself a photographer. Yes, very nice photos.
Lego Land Rover Defender half-track conversion is epic. The Land Rover Defender is easily one of the top 3 Lego kits, right up with the slightly more complex Bugatti, but the problem with that is every fan of bricks builds has one. But what comes next? For Land Rover fanatic Alexander Rosier, the Defender was a bit too normal, so he pieced together this unique half-track project. The body of the British 4x4 gets extended past where the 110 series allows. For the record, the stock kit is about 8 inches by 16 inches by 7 inches. So they added the tracks on to the half tracks to the back of this. It looks like it's a kit that you can buy, do it yourself.
So it makes it into a Centaur model then, basically.
Indeed, you are correct, sir.
Does it come with the little Saddam Hussein Lego figurine?
No.
So you'll have to supply your own of that.
Your own. That would be a unique, a bespoke customization.
Well, he is the world's best known Centaur owner. That's why I bring that up. Or was, I should say.
Was.
Get our tense correct.
There were also pictures on Instagram under Alexander Rosier. We'll have Rosier. We will have a link in the show notes. It's pretty cool. The engine bay in the back takes up the whole width of the of the vehicle. It's pretty cool. Very intricate looking too. So that's the news for May 2020. And now welcome back to the CentreSteer podcast, all the way from Northern California, the Northern California Land Rover Club. I got to make sure not to say North Carolina, so I'm apologizing ahead of time. When I see NC, I have to think Northern California. But it's Greg and Eric. They're part of the board of directors of the Northern California Land Rover Club, and they're going to give us an update on RovaCon 2019. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I appreciate being on.
How's life in California, Northern California?
Well, that's a kind of a loaded question right now. It's not that exciting, but, we're finally starting to get snow melt and, maybe we'll open some trails once we're allowed out of the house. Well, but other than that, it's California living. It's good.
There you go.
Difficult times in COVID, I would say. But yeah, it's promises on the future horizon. So
as we're recording this, they're projecting here in Western Pennsylvania for there to be snow in May.
Wow.
It happens, but not too often. And it's actually,
we came actually very close to having a month of April where our maximum temperature was less than our maximum for January.
Yeah. Yeah. It was one of the coldest Aprils in a long time.
Yeah. We had one day where it topped 70, and that was at the very end of the month.
It kind of reminds us of last year in California. I don't know if you're aware of our weather last year, but we had skiing on the 4th of July. We had that much snow that late. Wow. It was an insane, record breaking year last year. So actually we'll get into the RovaCon, the recap, but we ran into quite a bit of snow that you shouldn't run into in June.
Well, but that's up in the mountains, and that's because you had so much of it coming down. It hasn't melted off yet. What we're dealing with here is it's still coming out of the sky. in May.
That's so fun.
Well, we'll see if it actually holds that.
It'll be just enough to notice that it's happening, but not enough to be.
Well, right now it's cold.
Otherwise.
I mean, it's just above freezing here. That's how.
Yeah, it's like 42 or something like that.
And it shouldn't be.
Yeah, it's 20 degrees colder than it should be.
But we missed the segue, so we'll go back to the segue. Let's talk about.
Give us a chance to bitch about the weather, and we'll hijack any conversation.
So tell us about RoverCon 2019. Was it called RoverCon 2019 or RoverCon 1?
It was both. I would say it was the 2019, and it was the first one. It is a good segue though, the weather. I mean, because last year, what had happened was, as Eric was mentioning, was the snow was around well past Father's Day weekend, which we usually is a good marker as to the trails usually clear by Father's Day. And so we got out there and people were just literally breaking through the trail that weekend, which is the weekend after Father's Day. So the first all the way through from start to finish onto the Tahoe side happened like the weekend we were out there. So it left the trail in quite a bit of a rough state just because so much of the snow comes in and moves all the rocks and moves a lot of the dirt around. And over the summer, with the Jeep events that they have, the Jeep Jamboree and Jeepers Jamboree, they actually come out and some people call it paving the road, but they actually get a lot of the rocks kind of stacked up in a line to prevent, some of it's to prevent erosion and some of it's to prevent getting 400 to 600 trucks through in a weekend judiciously. Yeah. So they move through a lot of people on those weekends. So,
so let me pause you before I ask the question, though, for our listeners around the world. That Father's Day is in America is mid-June, I think. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. I think it's second weekend in the month or third
right.
weekend.
And paving, what they stack rocks or they remove rocks? I never not heard that before.
So what ends up happening is you get to an obstacle and you are, whatever, your wheelbase isn't aligned, your tire size isn't quite right to get over, or your bumper's hitting. You end up having to put rocks kind of around your tires to kind of line yourself up, essentially like a staircase. And it's really interesting because the wheelbase ends up being the biggest challenge, not necessarily the tire size. So like the longer Jeeps, the 4-door Jeeps will get stuck on things that nobody else gets stuck on, but they have like a 137 inch wheelbase.
I know that problem quite well.
Yeah.
Well, you also run into a lot of clearance problems with that, but the rock stacking and running the trail, it kind of goes both ways too. You kind of get deep into the season sometimes on a tricky obstacle. They'll dig out ruts with tires as well. But the thing is, after we had so much snow, you get a lot of movement of rocks and it takes a little time for it to settle. So before it settles, sometimes when you're trying to crawl over some rocks, you get some movement you don't expect. And that's a lot of times where you can get some body damage, or you could get shifted onto kind of a screwed up line if you're just kind of perched and your whole truck shifts over to the left a foot or two, something like that. So it was a little trickier because when we planned it out in June, we expected certain kind of trail conditions. We expected also it to be run for the last, month or two, but it wasn't. So that same weekend, went back in my Toyota days, I used to do the Rubathon event, which is the Toyota Land Cruisers of whatever association. And they would have that event the same weekend. And I've run that a couple times and I've never seen snow up there. And this time we had feet of snow. It was nuts. So some of the obstacles were wet when they're normally dry and just different conditions. It was exciting though.
Yeah, so it definitely added to the carnage. So we, I guess just to kind of give it from a starting perspective, we started off with, I think we had over 25 respond say they were going to attend, and then we actually had show up around 17 trucks, or 18 actually. One came out just kind of for a day run. And within the first 2 hours, we had 3 rigs, like DNF, like just drop out, and had to turn around and go back, and some of them in quite spectacular fashion, and my own included, made it a good quarter mile or so into the trail that's 21 miles long. Like I ran into some traffic and was waiting there to go forward with the traffic, and there was a 4-inch log that was my back tire was held up on, and I started to go forward right after the traffic cleared, and I heard a loud pop, and I was like, well, that's kind of strange. And I move over to the side because there's so many cars coming up behind me and people coming towards me from the front. As I'm driving out of the way of the trail to move away from the obstacles, I keep hearing like a pop and a click, and then it would be fine, and a pop and a click. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like a ringing pinion. So
too rhythmic.
Yeah, the big misconception about the Rubicon is that you worry about those Volkswagen-sized boulders, but it turns out the 4-inch wide logs are the ones that get you sometimes.
Take you out. I mean, and obviously this was a critical failure within the metal somewhere along the line of another trail run that just decided this was a good place to lose itself. But
well, that's like in a series truck when you snap an axle shaft, it's never on the trail. It's always pulling out of the gas station to refill on the way home.
Well, at least you're within AAA distance, right? Which is like the first upgrade any Land Rover owner makes.
You hope, yeah. But
I have the special unique. They don't advertise 200-mile tow level instead of 100-mile.
They do advertise it now. Actually, you can get it on the
So I climbed out of the car and I crawled underneath, and the shock load from the ring and pinion going was so substantial that it actually blew the thrust bolt on the housing, just broke it clearly. You could actually see it and put your finger right into the housing. So,
oh, nice.
So yeah, so I was the first one, and from there I turned around and kind of drove out in front row drive with one of the buddies like helping me, towing me with the tow strap on, and we kind of navigated the obstacles on the way out and found some other folks on our way back in. And Eric was one of them. He was waiting around for some other kind of stragglers to come through. We picked up a really cool Zach out of Utah. I picked up him and a couple other people, and he was in a Series 3 that's pretty well built on 35s, and it's got a 4BT in it.
Right on.
And it's the rear end was running Land Cruiser, I want to see Series 60 axles. It was the single piece with the C-clip, so that kind of older, much stoutier.
Well built besides that axle, which, it's always about the least common denominator or the weakest link, however you say it. And he made it about, I'd say, 2 or 3 times as far as Greg did.
He made it half a mile. He didn't make it. He made it half a mile.
And then that rear axle snapped, and he couldn't keep the wheel attached to his axle anymore. He
found a really good. There's some definitely pictures up on Instagram, and Allie Grit too has posted some of these on their page. But there is a really steep, I'm going to say close to 50-degree incline, maybe even more. That's all
it's a granite bowl. If you're familiar with any kind of images of the Rubicon, you're probably familiar with that big old granite bowl. That's kind of the iconic thing that is the Rubicon. And it's not like a hard section. It does get steep. So he had a welded rear diff. And the problem with that is when you're on the granite, it is sticky. Now the granite's pretty grippy, but also on the paths that you normally would take, there's a lot of rubber laid down, kind of like something you see at Moab as well. So just by turning around, you get a lot of, skidding and squeaking, a lot of resistance there. And it's just a lot of work for the rear axle because it's stiff too. So
and all the weight. And another one that was really cool, but this is the weather, right? There was a big puddle at the bottom of it. So it was like wheel spin. And then when he caught up, it all of a sudden caught onto the granite. So you have like all this momentum, all this like wheel spin, and then it finally catches. And
tremendous amount of back torque on that. That's not good.
It sounded like a grenade or something went off. It was quite a loud pop. So that one ended up being a really interesting one because that, we try to get him out of there because with the C-clip, where we can't pull axles, can't pull the axle shafts and just roll them.
Once you break those, you're done.
Yeah. So, we were trying to figure out how to get him out of there because he wasn't too far away, and he actually towed his car in. And so, looking back on it, we figured out a better way to do it. But at the time we were going to basically ratchet strap a log underneath there and let him crawl out in front wheel drive.
Yeah, he did the sled thing for a while until, the sled thing works good in the granite bowl. But, once you get the like rocks that require like articulation. You're not going to be able to sled through that. But yeah, it's a good thing that you only got a half a mile, because if he was like 6 miles in, forget about it.
He ended up passing by someone else that mentioned, so it ended up being called the Unicorn, which is just great because he had the tire with the broken half shaft like on the roof of the series truck, like where you normally have the spare tire. And it was just from like a visual image, it was just great. But later he ran across someone that had a little bit better idea, had done that previously in his life, and said, take your ratchet strap and ratchet strap the tire, from the door to the bumper and hold it in that way, so it doesn't back out and you can still roll on it. So he ended up doing that and getting out okay.
I think so.
We think so. Well, no, I talked to him.
We went on and we had to, yeah.
Was it a traditional Top Gear form? You left him behind?
He was fine. He didn't want us to wait around for him. He had him and his two brothers, and they were walking distance to their trailer in the truck. So it wasn't like we left him stranded, but we continued on another, literally quarter of a mile or so. We found another one of our friends had blown a front CV. So all within half a mile radius, we lost a ring and pinion, a rear axle, and then a front CV. The front CV was to be expected. It wasn't too big of a deal. We found we had spares and they were on the road pretty quickly. But
was that guy from Ohio?
Yeah, Craig, and his. I
didn't know
really
it was his front CV.
Yeah, it was a heavy duty one too.
Okay. He came all the way from Ohio.
He did. We had people from Utah and Ohio, and then we obviously had people from New York too.
The Alloy Grit guys came. Right. So if you want to, you can look at our Instagram, like the Rovacon. What is it? Rovacon_org, I believe.
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
Yeah. I think that's it. I run it, but I don't really look at it. But so we have pictures of all that kind of stuff, including the Unicorn. And so the Alloy Grit guy, Daniel was there, and the Unicorn made it into the magazine, I believe, as well. It's kind of so when we look back on it, like at the 10th annual, definitely, even though Zach only made it a half a mile,
he'll be remembered.
Definitely
forever.
Be one of the highlight memories of that trip. And he was a good sport about it. Everybody was a pretty good sport about it. Their breakdowns, even Greg. Yeah, it's tough to break down on a trail like that and have to go back, but I think we all.
Yeah, I continued on. I ended up leaving my truck at the front at the staging gates, and just my son and I piled our camping gear into other rigs, and we had the beer, which is the most prized possession. So we ended up.
Oh well, there you go.
Oh, exactly.
You were essential. You were mission critical.
We became mission critical, and we had Lutzy was one of the guys that was his brand new to him hike, the Defender 110, the high capacity pickup truck. So that ended up being great because we ended up putting a lot of parts and gear and beer in his trunk. And
no, thank God he packs light. I mean, he was a savior in that respect, because I didn't have any more room. I don't think anybody there had any room who was still behind us there. And we're still able to bring all the beer we needed to on the trip. So
it is mission critical. And I can confirm to you, it is in fact Rovacon_org. That is okay. And it turns out I wasn't following it. So thanks for letting me know about that. I didn't realize you had your own account for that. So good.
Excellent.
Well,
we should put more pictures up there. We should put more pictures up there, guys. We will as we get going towards the next one in August here. We'll get people excited about it.
Is that your way, since I run it, of telling me get on it, Eric?
No, I should be doing it too. I'm lazy. I haven't asked you for the account login yet, so that's my.
Well, I haven't offered it.
Well, there you go. You have to ask him for the account login, but first he has to know the name of the account.
That's true. I gave him the .org one.
So right after the Craig's repair, we kind of split up a little bit into 3 different groups, and so Eric was in the middle.
So my role was, I had the photographer Kevin with me. So I initially stayed back, and then I was kind of going forward and seeing people, and then coming back and kind of just scooting around, because by myself I could go a lot faster than the groups could go. So it was kind of I kind of screwed up as far as where I was, but I got to see all the good carnage.
That's what I was to say. You want to tell them about the Soup Bowl, which I think is one of the most iconic places.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it was more fun than a tractor pull for showing up and watching.
Yeah.
Break.
Oh, we're not even like more than like a mile
10%.
Right now.
Yeah.
So now we're about like, what is Soup Bowl? Like maybe 2 miles in?
Yeah, it's that 2 to 3 range. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not that far. But so I ended up going through Soup Bowl with Danny. He's got, if you look on either the Robocon stuff or the Alloy Grit, he's got this really cool, is it a Defender or a Series? It's this gray, like a 90, like this gray 90 with
Defender
these,
Defender 90,
with this weird looking like aluminum cage with like 2-inch pipe.
That's him.
It's a really cool rig, and he's did a lot of work
effort
this year, so I'm excited to see it this summer.
Could be a stage 1.
Okay, yeah, he's
just an early 90. They didn't make stage 1 90s.
Oh, okay.
And he's got the Cummins 2.8, the predecessor to the R2.8, and then
it's the same engine. The R2.8 is the 2.8. It's the same.
Yeah, engine. It's all mechanical, no electronics at all. It's so that was kind of interesting too.
Since you guys are on that page, you can look it up as I tell you. But so we're going up there, and I'll be honest with you, I've done the Rubicon several times. I got gun shy after seeing all this carnage in like the first 2 miles. You know, you start thinking, God, I better make it to camp because I'm responsible for handling some stuff, just as like Greg and Don. We're all part of the committee and we have to make it there. So I got a little gun shy, but I was like, screw it, I'm going to try a Soup Bowl. And I gave it a couple shots. It wasn't really happening. I just kind of backed out pretty quick. I didn't want to push it. Danny was not feeling gun shy.
Just, maybe a little bit of a visual as you can do best with what the Soup Bowl is, but so I think it would be good for those people that maybe haven't looked it up, or if you're listening now, maybe do a Google search.
It's like the most famous optional obstacle on the Rubicon. It's like kind of like a 2-tiered kind of step, but they're big steps. You don't see too many flops on there, but it is tricky. It's hard to do. Danny was getting spotted by this other guy that I had helped earlier on the trail, and we kind of ended up crossing paths a few times. This guy in a Toyota buggy. And what I've learned is you don't want to get spotted by guys who drive buggies too often. Or you don't want to have them lead the trail. They
have nothing to lose.
Yeah, they have nothing to lose, and sometimes they assume that you're going to be as capable as they are, or their vehicle, or whatever.
Or they want you to be as capable as them.
Yeah, and a 90-inch wheelbase too is tricky on this one. It's 7 feet high and over a 4-foot wide stretch, so it's a steep climb that you kind of have like a switch in. So you kind of got to go up one way, and then you pivot around and drop, and then you kind of climb up the other side. So it's like a switchback in the middle of it. That's depending on your wheelbase.
You want to keep a lot of finesse because you don't want to bounce too much because it can't turn you over. And that's basically what happened to Danny. And he flopped it. It was a relatively gentle flop. He ended up losing, a little trail nav. He ended up losing a lot of diesel though, which can be sketchy for several reasons. It's not ideal. It happened. We ended up getting over as quick as we can, and get him going again. But I believe we have the video on our social media and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's definitely on his Instagram page too.
Yeah. So we'll call that flop number 1.
Uh-oh, we're counting.
Yeah, there are more than one.
Alrighty then.
But it was so none of us that I know made it up Soup Bowl, but that's what we got Robicon 2 for.
I don't know that I didn't see Luke if he went through it or not. I know he's been through it.
I'm sure we would have heard it if Luke made it up.
So Soup Bowl is as you said, is a side part of the trail.
Yeah,
so there's a bypass.
Yeah.
So you have the trail and then this is like to the left, and it kind of loops around, and you have Soup Bowl in the kitchen, and they're just an obstacle. That's all. If you can make it over there, you can brag about it when you get to camp. So it's worth a try. But that was actually the first flop I've ever seen on Soup Bowl. And I've probably seen like 50 people do it. Because sometimes what you can do, which is fun, is like if you have time during the day, you just kind of camp out, have a beer, maybe lunch next to Soup Bowl. You just watch people come through and try it. It's fun.
A lot of people go there just for the day to turn around and come back out and watch people.
Oh, yeah. And that's one thing, too. We had a pretty good audience. The entire audience was relatively surprised to see Land Rovers in general. So they were kind of egging us all on a little bit. And, yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, we want to see the rich boys break their toys.
Yeah, exactly.
What happens after the Super Bowl?
So after the Super Bowl, it was relatively smooth up until till we got to the campsite and whatever, which was at Buck Island.
There was a pretty good phone call over a radio call about 10 minutes after the trail.
Oh, yeah, we had a fire, right?
We had some people yelling.
Forgot about the fire.
There was a fire.
We'll call that fire number 1, by the way.
Counting those two.
There was a Series 3 that was smoking, and the driver didn't know he was smoking, and people were telling him he was smoking. And so they jumped out and lifted the hood pretty quickly, and they had a couple wires that bounced together through all the vibration and just kind of sparked, and that caused like a good 15-20 minute cut everything apart and scrounge around some spare wire, and people's
rewire the truck
rewire the truck. And he was on his way after that. Series 3, it was on 33s, running with like a Chevy 350 in it, but could have used a little bit better, a little bit longer travel and suspension, I would say. Tire size was fine, but a little bit more. A little bit higher.
Could have used a bigger tire, would have probably helped. Oh, yeah.
Bigger tire would help, but suspension travel would have been better.
We'll get back to his vehicle before the end of the story, but yeah,
if we
ran into some more problems.
But yeah, pretty memorable trip.
Hey, I only put in the 4-hour recording card for the record.
Okay, we better hurry up here, Greg.
We can skip ahead towards the end.
Okay, well, so we get over to Buck Island. It was busy. It was very busy. So part of the problem, we said, there's so much snow and everything, is they didn't delay the opening. You can kind of just go through whenever, but people weren't able to get out on really any trails in our area because of the snow until like maybe the weekend before. So everybody was really ready to go. So it was crazy how busy it was. And that was kind of an issue on trail. But when it came to finding a camp place for all of us, it was a big issue. And yeah, so
it was the weekend before
split up
4th of July, right?
Yeah.
So 4th of July was like a Wednesday. So it was essentially the 4th of July crowd that goes out.
Yeah, and probably only like the second or third weekend that the Rubicon was actually open enough for regular people to be going through too.
Are there vehicles going on both, coming and going on the trail? Sounds like it's wide there and that you have traffic.
It's not wide enough, but yeah, there's literally traffic, and it literally doesn't stop. So there are people that just run it at night because they like run it at night. There are people that run it early in the morning. So you literally have people going by all hours of the day.
So is there a rush hour?
Yeah, Friday morning is rush hour.
Maybe like 11 o'clock if you want to start the trail. Like something like that is like probably not the best time, but I blame Jeep for it. I think naming,
we always do. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Naming their vehicle the Rubicon is really kind of blew it up.
I want to know if Google has sent street maps down.
They have.
Oh, yeah, okay.
They did with a TV with like an offshoot of the, forgot that, you were just mentioning the show earlier, that it's those 3 guys that go around the country and do like crazy driving kind of things. But there was an American
Top Gear
version.
Top Gear?
Yeah, it was American version of it. Did that.
Oh, yeah, I think it's called Top Gear with the guy from Friends.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, Matt LeBlond was on the British Top Gear after Clarkson and company left. And now he was on there for like 3 seasons and he's off.
I know Tanner Faust is one of the guys that's on that show. He's like a rally race car driver.
They keep changing who's on the Top Gears. The American Top Gear was on and it went off and it came back on. It's been... Anyway, so you're on the trail. You've gotten through the obstacles. We've had 1 rollover, 1 fire,
a broken CV, a broken rear ring gear, and just the regular crap. So we get to camp. Well, we're camping over at Buck Island, and we end up splitting into 2 groups just because we had a group kind of go early that found a camp and that wasn't big enough. And we just had the second group just had to find anything we can. So we do that. And then that was cool. We all had a good time there. I remember Danny cooked up some Kobe beef in the, what do they call it? Sous vide or something.
Yeah.
Sous vide. Yeah. That was kind of the highlight of that night. drank and were merry because we had kegs of beer and stuff, and that was fun.
That was the first time we got to see Danny's 90 creation, what he designed it for. Right? It opens up the back, and he puts like this igloo tent on top of the Defender,
like an ice fishing tent.
You walk underneath of it. So yeah.
But so then we take off in the morning. I load up the partially capped 5-gallon keg in my vehicle, and I kind of do it lazily where it's still sort of attached, which was a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I had it secured. I did not. I had it in a jockey box and stuff. Probably like 3/4 of a half mile, 3/4 of a mile before we get the big sluice. I have to get out of the car and just stop and wait. And me and I think it was Kevin or whoever was riding passenger, we kind of get in the back. We're just kind of getting some fresh air, and we noticed that my car is leaking. And like, oh shit! And I put my finger down there. I'm like trying to figure out, is it oil? Do I have like what kind of like car liquid it's going through? I put it up to my nose and face. Wait a minute, this is beer.
Mm-hmm.
I open up the
You're
tailgate.
leaking coolant. Human coolant.
I got about a water line of about 1.5 inches of beer and foam.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah. You need to secure that jockey box.
Yeah. And so we say, I forget what we said, but we were over the radio and we're like, Mayday, Mayday, we got a beer spillage. And we got a kick out of it. But luckily we brought enough beer to where we afforded that loss, and we're still good the next day.
Excellent,
but that was probably the worst carnage of the trip.
Oh yeah.
There.
No, yeah. You never want to waste beer. That's alcohol abuse.
And by the way, my car still on a hot day still stinks.
It's like milk. If you ever spill milk in a vehicle, you'll never get it out again.
So meanwhile, never drinking milk in a vehicle, only beer.
Yes. I had friends in Quebec. They have a couple kids, and they live about a half an hour away from the store because they're out in the sticks, and something happened. I forget exactly what, but they had 2 things of milk in the back of the car, and they broke open. Yeah. They eventually had to sell the car. They had to sell the car.
It's like that Seinfeld episode.
Yes.
While we had Eric figuring out his beer damage, Don was leading another group ahead of us, and in his red Disco one that's got the top all cut off and it's built up on 37. So he was coming down a big sluice, which is a really kind of steep, kind of V notch part of the trail that they dynamited out for mining operations. So it's got just massive boulders kind of all over, and they move around, and you kind of navigate through them and climb on top of them. And everything was going just fine, and they were coming all the way down, and some people were coming up as traffic, as you're mentioning. So he was trying to move to get out of the way, turns hard to driver's side and kind of rolls forward onto the edge of the trail. And right as he did that, really extended that passenger side CV and caused it to pop, kind of blew that CV. So it wasn't too much of an issue for him because he was already at the bottom of the hill. But, so then he rolls into camp, and, by the time we get there, he's, full thing's disassembled, and he's pulling out the diff and the axle so that he can drive out rear-wheel drive the next day, because the next day is the last part of the
Wait, so he broke that front axle trying to get out of the way?
Yeah.
That's embarrassing. No wonder I haven't heard that story. I thought it was like some kind of hero move up a boulder or something. I didn't realize he was just getting his vehicle out of the way of.
Many problems happen when you think it's easy and you're not paying attention.
That's what you get for trying to be nice and be polite.
Yeah, don't make that mistake again.
So they got in, and we had the Rubicon Springs it was actually really old. It goes back to the 1800s, and that's one of the resorts there. That's kind of where we stay for our Saturday night, and had really nice festivities. That's where the Jeepers Jamboree hold their events. They have stage. It's a really big area. You can hold, a couple hundred vehicles, if not more. And they've They've built helicopter pads out there on top of the rocks. They can fly vans and food in, and they do quite the setup.
So Clarkson can fly in. And,
right. Don't get it twisted here, Greg. It's just basically dirt that we're parking and camping on. It's like it may have been a resort, but it's not
anymore. But
you can't get like breakfast in bed over there. There's no real, besides bathroom facilities, it's a 4x4 campground.
It's a remote campground. One time it was mud. Yeah. It was mud baths, but it's neat to see that it's still open, and it's private ground, so you actually pay to use the facilities. And but as far as dispersed campsites go, it is quite nice. So
yeah.
Well, compared to a pile of boulders, it would be a resort.
Yeah. It's cool because it's the springs. You have the little creek going through that you can kind of hang out by, and bathrooms. And, the nice thing about it is we can, you have to pay, but that's kind of a good thing for us. That means we can reserve it. So we're able to get a better weekend this year. We're going to be doing it in the middle of August compared to tail end of June last year. So it works out good. It does mean that we have to pay, but it means that we have a secure place that we know we can house everybody that we want and have a good time there, which is cool.
And keep the riffraff out too, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, it does somewhat.
Are you talking about the Toyota guys? Because they still roll through.
Well, I'm not naming names, but
so there's a Rubicon Springs Bridge. Is that to get there? I'm looking at Google as we're talking, and one of the pictures comes up. There's a Defender going across the bridge.
Well, look at our Instagram page again. You'll surely see a picture or two of that iconic bridge. Just going over, and they rebuilt it I want to say maybe 5 years ago or something. So
It's pretty new, yeah.
Pretty nice.
It's one of the great things about going out there is just all the access to the lakes and the freshwater streams for swimming in, fishing. A lot of people bring the inflatable stand-up paddle boards or kayaks on their rigs out there. So that was one of the things that was kind of, a bummer a little bit this last time, was just because of the snow. It was still so cold that it made it difficult to go in the water. People still did, but it was cold. So, by kind of reorganizing it and realigning it this year to a later date, hopefully it'll be a lot warmer and people will be excited to actually get in the water.
Oh yeah. And just a little past where we camped at the Rubicon Springs, there's this place called the Dirty Dozen, where it's some kind of big slavish areas that the creek kind of runs through, and they have a couple swimming pools and this kind of long waterfall area you can kind of hang out. But they also have at one of the swimming pools a nice rope swing. August, the water's pretty decent over there. I'm gonna say by that swimming pool you probably get mid to 70, 77 degree temperatures in that water. I told you guys earlier I own a swimming pool company, so I'm real precise with my temperatures, so you can trust me on that 70 to 77. So it'll be really nice this year if we can get to Springs on Saturday relatively early. People can hang out and just really enjoy the nature that the Rubicon has to offer besides just the wheeling.
Before we talk about this year's Rubicon, so why don't we finish up on last year? And there's one more day to discuss. Any more rollings? Any more rollovers? Any more fires?
Yeah, what sucks about the recap is I want to say we had a great time and everything, which we did, but the interesting parts of the recap that are going over all the terrible carnage. Right. So don't get it twisted. Between all the carnage we're talking about, which probably makes for better podcasting, there's a lot of good, excellent wheeling and just good times. But back to the carnage. Yeah.
But I also think, Land Rover is all about adventure, right? So you really get into Land Rover for the sense of adventure and to get out and to go do something and test yourself. So, and I would say is through all this, everybody got off the trail and drove home, or towed their one home. But I drove home front wheel drive 2.5 hours. So maybe it wasn't the way I wanted to end it, but it still ended great for me. And
at least it was downhill on the way home.
It was downhill. Yeah. So the last day was quite interesting. We already knew that we had Dawn with only rear wheel drive. So we broke the groups up again into 2 groups. And
hold on, Greg. Let's give the situation. So the last day we're going from the springs out to the top of the side. And the whole deal with the last day is we're going up this place called Cadillac Hill. So what it is, it's a very narrow, very steep section. I think it's named after like old Cadillac that's
still there, yeah,
burned or something like that. Okay, it's still there. But basically, it's like, okay, we got to go up this very steep and narrow section. We got a dude in Dawn who does not have a front axle that's going to be functional. So you're going to have a lot of weight on the rear axle, and you'll be going up a very steep section. And if you screw up, there's not going to be passing areas. So
there's no passing in this area.
This is there's a little bit of anxiety, in the situation to begin with.
It's a shelf road, literally on the side of a cliff coming up out of the valley.
Or is it a two-way?
It's
two-way.
It's just a trail. It's just a trail.
Okay.
So it's you can really only fit 1 car wide. There's like at the very bottom, you can kind of pull off into the trees and fits and let some people go by.
But the thing is, it's Sunday. The etiquette is you don't really come down to Cadillac on Sunday. Everybody kind of knows that, just because everybody is exiting the trail on Sunday. If you're coming down, it's just going to be a mess. So you're not going to run into that much traffic, but you do sometimes. But it's very light on a Sunday. So yeah, I got out of that place first thing in the morning to avoid any dawn mishaps. But yeah, so
I would say it's over 1,000 feet incline from the bottom up to the top. So in a very short period of time, so it's a bunch of switchbacks. It's not kind of like a gradual climb out.
Yeah. So what happened was, this is the first time I wish Don was in on one of these things. So he's going up, and obviously when you're going with just your rear axle, 2-wheel drive, it's a different scenario. You got to be clever with your momentum, blah, blah, blah. And from what I heard from him is
I was there
a little
too.
overzealous on the skinny pedal, and he popped his rear axle.
He was making good progress driving rear wheel drive. And it's Cadillac Hill at this time of year is really, really wet. Probably the wettest part of the trail, because the snow is right above it on the top of the mountain peak. So it's draining down towards the river basin, kind of the Rubicon Springs where we were camping. So literally the whole thing was like a mud bath, like climbing out. And it's a kind of a turn, and you have to go, it's an incline and it's granite. And he was trying to basically get momentum to go around a big boulder. And he just winched before that, and we said we should winch you again, and he's like, no, I think I can make this. And that was kind of the famous last words from there.
This will be easy.
Yeah, worst case, even more so than this problem was, and typically you just grab a long magnet, on the telescoping rod, pull the hub, slide in there, pull the axle piece out, and you're kind of on your way. Not that big of a deal. His wheels, you don't even have to take them off to get the hub off and pull an axle and swap axles. And so he has an axle. So that was the plan, right? We're just going to real quick swap axles. We'll be back on our way.
Real quick. Yeah. Just
real
quick. 2 hours later.
2 hours later, the weight of the truck was in the incline had pinched the portion that was stuck into the ring and pinion.
The stub never comes out nicely in that situation.
Yeah, well, it wasn't aligned.
That's what she said.
Exactly. And it broke at the stub.
That was for Greg.
And that's my favorite line. And so we literally had to take the whole ring and pinion, the whole differential out to get the axle piece out, and then put it all back together, and then put the spare axle shaft back in.
Yep.
And
keep in mind, this is he just broke a chromoly axle shaft in the rear, and we're putting in a stock. So on top of, fine, you got it fixed. It's how confident are you of making it up the section you just snapped a chromoly axle? So Now
So we hooked
move
up
into
the toe strap. We hooked up the toe strap from that point on and said, we're just
that guy who's talking about Lutz with that, what was it? What is this? A 130?
The 110 high capacity pickup truck. Yeah.
Yeah. But so he's pulling them up, and this is kind of
a little bit more about
number
Lutzy's
2
truck. Lutzy's truck is a 300 TDI with an underdrive in the R380. So in low range, first gear with the underdrive engaged, it literally is in full on tractor mode.
That's what you need for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he's towing Don around a turn, and Eric, you can finish this one. This is a great one.
I felt bad for Don the night before, having to deal with the whole like instead of hanging out drinking beers by the fire, he's got to deal with taking his ring gear or whatever he had to deal with on the front axle. I forget, and then he runs into this issue, which is, keep in mind that it is in full sun when he's fixing it, and a narrow part of the trail where he's getting passed by people who need to spot the passers. It's just not fun. So doing that, and then he's getting pulled up, and I'm actually riding passenger in Lutz's vehicle, and we're pulling him up, and we're just kind of cruising along, and it's going pretty smooth. And we get to the section where it's kind of like an S, and it's uphill, so he needs all the help he can get. And because it's an S, we got to a point where we were pulling like perpendicular to him on the outside shackle of the front bumper, if you can kind of picture that. We didn't feel a thing in his vehicle, and we pulled him right over. It's the first flop I've ever seen going uphill.
Yeah.
I mean, and
up a tree. Yeah.
So we
flopped him,
and we didn't feel anything. And unfortunately, with his vehicle, I guess the key can come out of the ignition and it won't kill the car, because when he flopped, the key fell out, but his engine was still running. So you got to find
the key to stick it back in to shut it off.
And the engine is running. You have this plume of whitish blue smoke.
Of course you do.
There's some really good pictures about that. Yeah, Daniel's a really good picture.
I forget what Don said. He said something about like bringing in a new pope. It's pretty funny. But so it's pluming. So they're fishing around trying to kill this engine.
It depends.
Yeah. Again, go look at the Rovicon.org. I believe I have video of the smoke and all the whole deal. And he's got the alloying grit guy in the passenger too. So it's all pretty well documented. So that happens. They finally, I think they found the key and were able to kill the engine before the sump went dry and seized the thing up.
But the engine was starting to run away too at the same time. It was escalating in RPM.
It was not good.
Sure.
Yeah.
All the extra oil going places it's not supposed to go.
Yeah, and just the weight and the gravity of the throttle cable, I think, too, pulled it back. And
the thick throttle cable.
Thought, yeah.
So we get the thing back over. The guy behind it, I forget who it was. Was it Luke? But either way, we flip it back over, and the thing is hydrolocked. So we got to winch it out of the trail, get it up kind of away so people can pass, and start pulling spark plugs out. And it's just like at that point, I mean, I've been there, not to that extent, but it is just so extremely frustrating. But Don, he was a champ. He kept going at it. I would have,
drove it home.
But I would have personally, I would have said, "You guys, can you take the plugs out? I need to take a little nap or something or calm down." But he kept his calm and he got it done.
Power of the White Claw.
Yes, power of the White Claw. I think it was Black Cherry that was powering him. But yeah, so pulled out the plugs, shot out whatever oil was in there, got that thing started, got it up the hill. He was only about maybe a quarter mile away from the lookout where we all were. And then after that, we ran into issues with that other Defender he was talking about.
The series truck,
the series that had the fire.
Not even half a mile from the exits. Basically,
but a tricky section though.
Tricky section and a narrow section, and on top of that, it was a flooded section. So the trail was flooded.
This is where we ran into a lot of snow.
Yeah, snow drifts and
because you're higher up in the mountains now because you've gone up. You said
we're now above 7,000 feet at this point.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So now you're running into encountering snow drifts and
and so what happened with that series truck is it's running all original equipment in the front, but that 350 has got a lot of torque and a lot of power, and it's just banging on the axle assembly and hub assembly. And as you know, Harold, the way the steering linkage is actually connected to the bottom, and all the screws just came loose, and he basically had his wheels go outside.
Ripped the arms right off the hubs, huh?
Just disconnected. So, now we're...
And part of the problem is he used screws instead of bolts. You never want to do that on an axle. We actually had a bunch of kids with us, and they were walking, they saw something not like shiny metal, and we're like, oh, what's this? And we looked at it, and someone put it in their pocket, and then later we got further up the trail, and the arms are falling apart, and we're like, we get underneath, and all the bolts are gone. So now we're trying to find them, and we just came through probably like 150 yards of flooded trail. So we're like, he had sheared 3 out of 4 bolts on the steering arm, that comes off the knuckle.
And 2 of them just backed out. And so one of them we had in someone's pocket. So that worked out. The other one, we had to pull a tap and die out. One of the guys had a tap and die set and backed out the sheared bolt. And then we robbed one from the other side because no one had a bolt like that was going to fit. So he drove home with 2 on each side versus 4 on each side, but he did make it.
It got him home.
It added an extra hour and a half and some excitement
and a good story for around the campfire.
Nothing like trailside machining.
Yeah.
Well, and that also that exact repair was one of the most depressing ones because we're so close to the end. And when we saw what was going on, at first we didn't think we had a way to get them out. We sat there for a while, and we just thought, you know what, dude, at this point, we're this close to the end, maybe it's best to just get this out of the way and come back with the proper tools and things that get you out of here. And honestly, I didn't really know what happened till the next day because most of us, we just had to kind of book it. There wasn't room to all kind of hang out and deal with this repair. And look, I think it was Colin who stayed with him.
Colin. There was a few of us. We were in two
professional mechanics. Colin owned a Land Rover shop. Just kind of had to let those guys deal with it and take off. And luckily, they did.
I would say even the owner of the series truck is pretty well mechanically inclined too. But he just didn't. You didn't have any foreshadowing to think about bringing a tap and die set to back out.
No, of course.
Sheer bolts.
No.
So,
or the foresight to think about reinforcing his front axle to put up with the torque of a 350.
And that's what he said when he first did that. He was like, "I'm not bringing it back here like this. I'm going to fix a bunch of stuff." So, learn once, I guess.
Yeah.
So when you get to the top of this Cadillac hill, then do you go? Does it go down? I guess another continues on.
You go straight into Lake Tahoe, into the beautiful west shore of Lake Tahoe.
Who had birds? I heard birds.
Oh yeah, that's over at my place.
Wow,
I got birds hanging around, some crows.
That microphone does a really good job.
They're just hanging out by the pool, right?
Yeah. So at that point, everybody kind of went their own ways. Some people had, Craig from Ohio had towed a trailer in, and he had his trailer there waiting at the exit, and so he hooked it up and actually, drove out to Moab and left it there so he could fly out later for the Moab events. And some people headed home, some people from, Southern Cal and kind of all over. And
so you had 17 trucks start and all 17 finished?
They all got home.
I think I like that.
Nobody died.
That. Yes. No one. Okay. Yeah. So no one got hurt. 3 trucks had problems but they all got home. Is that
more than 3 trucks had problems? Okay. I would say a good 5 had, or 6 had problems. But I mean, some of them were like, below a CV, and you had you definitely bring the Rubicon with spares.
So is that typical for the Rubicon Trail? I mean, do all makes have the same
yes,
issue?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not.
They all.
This was unusual as far as if you want to take the percentage of vehicles that were rendered incapable of finishing. This was high. I mean, we started with 17. I want to say we probably finished with maybe 13, something like that. Obviously, if you had something close to 25% of the cars not being able to finish like a cheap Jamboree, the trail would be closed forever. It'd just be too much. So that's actually one of the things we're going to address this year. Is number one, we're going to limit the amount of cars even though it's higher than the limit of the 17, is we don't want too many cars because you can run into these issues. Number two is we're going to be a little more strict about the requirements of the driver and the vehicle before, because you don't want to be too ambitious on this kind of a trip, because we're lucky to where the majority of the catastrophic failures were relatively early. But like I said earlier, if you bust a C-clip axle 6 miles in, I mean, I can't help you.
Oh yeah, that's a bad scene.
So let's move then to RovaCon 2020, and so give us the details: when, where, why.
Weekend of August 15th. We'll start on a Friday morning. We'll do the same thing as we did this last time. We'll have people kind of come on Sunday or Thursday and camp Thursday, and we'll have those that can make it out Thursday night. Have a barbecue campfire, and bring all your own food, whatever you want to eat for that portion, and then we'll kick off Friday morning. And with 30 vehicles, we'll have to go in waves again. So we can't run 30 at one time through. We would never get through. So we'll probably grow, somewhere between 5 and 7 in a group. So kind of break it up into a few. Depending on what time people come into, like we have people come in Friday morning, like around noon and 1, because you only have to meet up with us at the campsites, right? So you kind of hang out with everybody at the 2 different camp zones. Some people can come in later if they get off work, or some people can even come and start earlier if they think it's going to take them longer. But
having registration, is there a fee?
Yeah, so this year's going to be a little different from last year in kind of that way. So last year, if you remember our interview, we really chucked it together in like a 6-week period. We started very late. We weren't really worried about getting too many people because it was thrown together so late. This year, we're starting earlier. Obviously, we have a better reservation as far as later in the summer. We're in the alloy and grit. We have other pages going. So we assume that we're going to have more people wanting to do it. So we're going to put a cap at 30 because it's just too hard to deal with more people than that. And this year, we're also going to be charging a registration fee, which is basically going to cover the cost of what we have to pay per vehicle to camp at Rubicon Springs, and also just pay for the swag that we want to get, like a shirt, patch, that kind of stuff. Even though we're charging now, our goal is to break even. If we can break even, we're happy. All we're trying to do is build the event. That's kind of our strategy on the whole thing.
Does registration open at a specific time, or is it rolling open? Is it open now so that they should jump on it if you're interested?
I think we'll have it open in June. I think is our target. So
okay.
By the time this comes out, I think hopefully we'll have it open.
Okay.
And there'll be 2 different prices for members and non-members. It's not going to be a substantial difference, but we want to cover some of our members' fees compared to a non-member. This will be an event that we continue doing. So even if people who are out of state or not local to Northern California, if they want to be a member, just support the club and what we're trying to do, I think that would be great. And we'd love to have them as members and obviously give them the discounted fee and all the stuff that comes with membership, including access to our forum. That would be good. If you're into this kind of stuff, regardless of whether you live in the area or not, it's a good club to be in because we are into this type of rock crawling more than any other Land Rover club in the United States or in the world is. So being part of the club, not only will it give you access to the resources that we have with our members, if you're into this kind of thing, why not support a club that is into it as well?
Now, is your registration fee, is that per person or per truck?
Vehicle, yeah.
Per vehicle?
Well, it's per driver, and then we have we're doing a very small passenger registration.
Cover the t-shirt.
I think it's like, I forget what it is, like $10, $15, but just so we can give them something. And
okay.
The majority of our costs are based on a truck camping, per truck camping.
But the registration is vaguely per person in that you have a fee for the driver and a fee for passengers, different fee for passengers.
Yeah, I mean, because the biggest per person expense we have to deal with is, we said that Rubicon Springs is privately owned, which is nice because we can rent, and reserve it, but we do have to pay per spot. So that's built into it. So that's why it's more per vehicle. We're assuming that the driver and passenger are camping together.
And the website is rovicon.org, ROVICON.org. And that's where you can see pictures of last year. You can register for this year. The right place to go.
That's the right place to go, yeah. So once the links to sign up and pay. It'll be through that page, and it'll actually take you into our club's website and store where you can kind of purchase there. Definitely we had people come from far away last time, and with more planning, we can definitely accommodate folks. I know we've had people reaching out to the social media platform already asking about coming out this time. I know Daniel from Rally and Grit's planning on bringing his own truck out this time, and Craig really enjoyed it. He's planning to come back out with a few friends, he was saying. So we anticipate having pretty close to our 30 target, and so hopefully people can plan for it and also start thinking about it for the following year. If this year they already have some other trip planned up for that weekend.
Yeah, we had our 30 number also planned out before all this COVID stuff happened. So obviously it's going to make planning a little tougher for people, but anywhere from 20 to 30, I think would make for a really, really good event.
It's a good size. And to be clear, this is different than I think other rallies or other trail runs where this is a little more, I guess, on the hardcore side. You don't have a location where everybody camps, and then if you want to go on the trail, you can, which is more of a MAR situation. This sounds like everybody's on the trail, everybody's going.
No, this is a moving venue. If you don't keep moving, you get left behind.
This is rock crawling. This is not it's a Land Rover event, but it's not just about having the vehicle and doing that. This is about the hobby of rock crawling.
I mean, I think just to further clarify that, Eric, I mean, a lot of people do rock climbing across the country, but it's a very more condensed space, right? We're covering 21 miles or so far, right? So we're not like in the MAR, right? In Virginia, where they go in one camping zone and they have a whole bunch of trails from there. Like some are rock crawling, some are like scenic. It starts at one place and it finishes at 21 miles away, completely different. And we have 2 designated camping zones for each night. So we will keep moving. And that's one of the reasons we are going to put more strict requirements into the vehicles, is because we need to get everybody through. We need everybody through in the weekend. So if we let people with independent suspension in, or people with 33-inch tall tires, it's not to say that you couldn't make it with those vehicles. You definitely could, but your time needed is right. Substantially longer than what we can allot for a 3-day event. So
no Freelanders.
Not unless you built it onto, not unless you rebuilt it onto something crazy, right? I don't want to say no, and you show up with 40s and a series frame or something like that.
I think we'd have to find one that actually runs first, and then we can talk about it.
Well, actually, you could take a body and drop it onto a real Land Rover.
That's what I was saying. If a guy had somebody was one.
Well, if a guy had a body that a chimney had not previously fallen upon. One could build such a thing.
All right. So that is Rovacon 2020. That's the Northern California Land Rover Club sponsors it. You go out to rovacon.org for all the information on where it's located, when it is, and the requirements for your vehicle, and also to register if you are so inclined to attend.
Yeah. And if anybody has any questions about specific vehicle requirements or anything like that, just feel free to hit us up on our NorCalRovers.org website or our Facebook page, or you can DM me through the Instagram, which is NCLR Club, NCLR Club, right, Greg?
I think that's right. I think it is NCLR Club.
Yeah.
Yet another Instagram account you can't remember the name of, huh, Eric?
Well, I know none of the passwords, by the way, either. It's just you sign into them once and you just click it. But you can DM me through any of that stuff, or go through the actual website and we can answer your questions.
Yeah, I'll have a link in the show notes.
Because it's definitely something you want to make sure that you're equipped to do, because it's a whole lot of fun in the right vehicle. It can be a lot of frustration in the wrong vehicle.
If you're coming from a distance, please reach out and let us know, and we can help you plan around when you should arrive and tow rigs and where to park and stuff like that, like we did last time with people bringing that stuff. So we want to make sure you line yourself up for success. You're not driving twice as far to go get your tow rig as you should have to.
Well, Greg and Eric, thank you very much for coming on the show and giving us the overview and the review and now the preview of Rovacon. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed show number 86 for May 2020. I want to thank Morgan and Harold and Dixon for helping us out today on the show. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, well, $10 is $10.
No problem. It was quite
me.
entertaining. Episode 86. So this episode was inspired by Don Adams of Get Smart, Agent 86.
I lost interest when he switched from a Sunbeam Alpine to a Carmen Ghia.
He also had a Tiger. There's 3 cars used.
Did he upgrade to the Tiger?
I believe so.
Cool.
And thanks to Greg and Eric of Northern California Land Rover Club for talking about Rovacon. If you are going to attend Rovacon, we would like to hear about that. Maybe let us know how it went, how it goes. Maybe you can give us a field report.
Tell us how many CV joints you went through.
And also continuing thanks to the One True Packs for his production support. Visit our website, CentreSteer.com, to listen to previous shows and for show notes, which have links to stories discussed in today's show. We're part of the 4x4 Radio Network, and I invite you to check out the other 4x4 related shows at 4x4radionetwork.com. If you are not a subscriber to the show, please do so you get the show automatically into whatever podcast app that you have. And now it could be YouTube. Actually, you could also get the show on YouTube if you want to listen to it there. With YouTube, you need to subscribe. You can subscribe there. And then if you want to get notified, you have to click the bell to make sure you're notified. Otherwise, YouTube just chooses when it wants to notify people.
Does it go ding when you click it?
Yes.
Okay. Very good.
I don't know, but I'm going to say yes. You can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email, and now voicemail. We're looking forward to our first proper voicemail. First proper voicemail we get, we'll send them a shirt. How's that? We'll send you a CentreSteer shirt. You can directly support the show at patreon.com/CentreSteer. Buy us a tee or t-shirt or sticker. And if you click on store on the menu on the webpage, get all the details for those. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear from you and what you're up to in your Land Rover. Until next time, I ask you to share the show with one other Land Rover enthusiast.
You may now 86 this show and resume your essential things.
Which was a mistake.